proclaim ourselves. We proclaim Jesus Christ as Lord and ourselves as your slaves for Jesus' sake. For it is the God who said, light will shine out of darkness, who has shown in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Christ. But we have this treasure in clay jars so that it may be made clear that this extraordinary power belongs to God and does not come from us. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed, always carrying around in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be made visible in our bodies. For we who are living are always being handed over to death for Jesus' sake, so that the life of Jesus may also be made visible in our mortal flesh. So death is at work in us, but life in you. Psalm 139, 1 through 6, and 13 through 18. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, Lord, you know it completely. You hem me in, behind and before, and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that I cannot attain it. For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works that I know very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes beheld my unformed substance. In your book were written all the days that were formed for me, when none of them as yet existed. How weighty to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. I try to count them. They are more than the sand. I come to the end. I am still with you. May God bless the reading of his holy word. This morning, we welcome back Reverend Libby Boatwright as she shares her message, No Back Door.
Thank you. Thanks, Nancy. It's good to be back to see everyone. And the last time I was with you was Mother's Day. And yes, I did go to the game and they won. So it was good. Just want you to know that it was worth getting there in time. In the recent movie, Evan Almighty, a newly elected congressman, Evan Baxter, boasts a campaign slogan that says he will change the world. And God, taking his words seriously, wants him to build an ark. But Evan is desperate to begin his career as a junior member of Congress and tries to avoid God. And he makes all these hilarious attempts to get away from the Creator, but he can't. God is everywhere he looks. Evan races his car to escape, and God is in the back seat. God's the pedestrian crossing the street, the man on the sidewalk waving to him, the man sitting next to him in the congressional meeting room. There is no escape from the Father in heaven and God's mission for his life. And many characters have found themselves in the same situation in the Bible. I mean, Adam and Eve try to hide from God in the garden, assuming God can't see them. And Jonah certainly isn't happy with his assignment for Nineveh and attempts to board a boat headed in the opposite direction. Moses flees to the hinterlands to hide in the nomadic tribes of the desert. Yet all of these people are within God's knowing gaze, and each one eventually hears from God to change their escape route. King David spent many months on the run from his enemies, his accusers. And in this psalm, possibly written by him, he looks back on his life and considers that he never had to run away from God. For his omnipresence and omniscience was a constant. You see, this psalm is not meant to spell out dry doctrine, but to see God's love in the context of a personal relationship with his creation. God knows and cares for each one of us because God himself fashioned and designed us. The Psalms are actually songs, and they were sung in worship, and were a way of expressing so many different facets of life, of joy and sorrow and regret and wonder and knowledge of God's power to overcome evil and warring factions in the world, all in the context of history. And with the exception of Psalm 88, God is always triumphant, always benevolent in the end. Psalm 139 is really like a song in 4 stanzas or sections of questions answered with a strange interlude. The first question is, how does God know me? The second one is, how near is God to me? The third one is, how does God reveal himself? And finally, how can I remain constant with God? And in each instance, the psalmist answers his own question, for God is but a touch away. So the first stanza is about knowledge. In fact, the word know is mentioned 7 times. It's a number of completeness. So we are fully and completely known by God. In fact, the word here for know actually means dig. So God really digs us. Okay, that's a 60s phrase. So if you're not with me, you dig me and therefore you know me. He knows when we rest, when we get up. God knows every thought, every journey, all the habits and choices, for he is acquainted in all our ways, even the ones we don't want him to know about. God understands our language and communicates with us, and he's active behind us in the past, before us in the future, and he lays his hand upon us in the present. His knowledge is about us is beyond the most powerful search engine known or AI programming available, or despite the vastness of the universe, God knows every detail of our lives. So then the psalmist asks, if God knows me so well, how near are you to me? And God says, I'm inescapable. There's no back door. If you head up to heaven, God will be there. If you plummet to the depths of hell, the Creator will be there too. Why? Because God created both places. He owns and runs the universe. The difference is that in heaven, we will know the full love and compassion and glory and warmth of the light of God. And in the depths, as it's called, will be the absence of all those things, literally the dark side, the wrath of God, his negatives, full separation. But then the psalmist asks about, what about this separation? Can we find any distance from God? And again, the answer is no. The wings of the dawn is a beautiful poetic phrase, for it represents the rays of a rising sun shooting across the heavens at the speed of light to reach the farthest bounds of the horizon, the herald of the day. It's really saying, if I could travel at the speed of light, or try to reach the outermost parts of the sea, your hands would still scoop me up, and your right hand, the power and justice hand, would hold me fast. Some of you may have gone to Honolulu. Anybody gone to Honolulu in your lifetime? Okay, well, there's a place in Honolulu called the Magic Island, where hundreds of people line the shore every evening to watch the sunset, hoping to see what they will see called the green flash. It's a split second of color that bursts across the horizon, but it often escapes the eye. For God's speed is so much faster than the human eye or mind can conceive. But they still go every night and they still watch for it. So from the top of the universe to the bottom, to the farthest edges of the earth, the psalmist now questions whether darkness would be a place of escape. And once again, the answer is still no. Darkness is as light to God, for darkness is not dark to the Creator. The night is as bright as the day. And when I hear this, I'm reminded of the verses in John 1 where it says, in him, Christ was life, and that life was the light of people. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not overcome it. And then there's that wonderful verse in Revelation 22 when we're reminded that heaven does not have a temple in the city, for the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb, Jesus, are its temple. And the city does not need the sun or the moon to shine for it, for the glory of God gives its light, and the Lamb is its lamp. The nations will walk by its light, and the kings of the earth will bring their splendor into it. Oh, what a picture. Light is the common denominator of God's glory, his splendor. And there's nothing, not kings, nor principalities, nor powers of the dark side that even can compromise that light. It's as if God had this huge searchlight, a spotlight with more watts than anyone could count that overcomes any fear, any darkness we might know. For in Romans 8, it reminds us that nothing can separate us from the love of God. So after the psalmist has answered the questions about God knowing us and being near to us, the question now is, how do I know you love me this much? And then God reveals his design for our bodies in the secret place, the depths of the earth, figurative language for the womb, stressing the hidden and mysterious operations that occur there. See, the pregnant woman is a vehicle within who God is at work on the human soul. So here, dark and secret are good places. It is in God's amazing laboratory of thousands of miles of veins and ventricles and muscles that he forms us in our mother's womb, where we are fearfully and wonderfully made. The frame is the foundation of the body, the bone and muscular system, for we are intricately wrought. And the Hebrew word actually means embroidered or woven together. I mean, think of it. Can you see God sitting down somewhere on his throne and actually weaving you, embroidering you, finding out what it is that makes you unique and beautiful? I have the great pleasure of hearing about the blanket makers and the knitters and the creative work of the Happy Meal makers. And I think of God creating and embroidering each one of us at birth. The color of our eyes, our skin, our hair, our unique facial features, endowing us with brain and long, slender fingers if we play instruments, or others with long frames to play sports, and still others with large hearts to offer compassion and listening ears to meet the needs of others. Whatever way we're made, we are very special to God, for our DNA, our genetic bonding makes us one of a kind, one of a million. Every one of us unique. And God knew us before we were born. He beheld our unformed substance. In fact, the word in Hebrew actually means rolled up substance. Many theologians suggest that this is the embryo waiting to reveal God's glory in creation. For he already knows us, and he knows the calendar of our days before we live them out. But he's allowing us the free will to live them the way we can. See, we can't possibly come up with a human design on our own, although we've tried many times. Scientists are continually working on their own models to conceive new horizons in anatomy and function. But no matter how much we try, God's design is always perfect, intricate, and too wonderful for words. A professor at Texas A&M, Dr. John McIntyre, notes that the thing that impressed him most about the Christian faith was the fact that the Bible was the same kind of cohesive system as nature. That the more he examines the Bible, the more complex it appears, and the deeper and more unfathomable are its thoughts. Consider the following from two other scientists, Clayton and Jansma. I love this illustration because it talks about the cell. We now know that a single cell with a nucleus is the microscopic equivalent of any entire high-tech industrial city. It is surrounded by a wall armed with a tight security system, selectively allowing raw materials to enter and manufactured products to leave. And the city contains a factory in production around the clock, tied to 1 trillion other similar factories by a mysterious communications network that dictates repair schedules and keeps track of all inventory. That's the human cell. A special library within each city is filled with detailed blueprints for every piece of machinery and maintenance equipment it uses. In living organisms, this information includes every minute characteristic of the organism. Directions for all this activity are encoded in our DNA, the genetic material of each cell, which is wound into the shape of that wonderful helix, which can be found in every human cell, packaged with 46 chromosomes in an infinitesimal nucleus. I mean, when you hear the words fearfully and wonderfully made, do you ever consider the details of what God has created in each cell? So what happens when we get to the ends of the earth, when we've discovered all the knowledge we think there is? Well, God is still ahead of us. He's always ready to reveal even more of the sum of his vast universe, more than the grains of sand. And even after this reverie, this dream, even if you come to the end of your wits, God is still more. He knows all our thoughts, but we cannot possibly comprehend God's thoughts. It would seem that these multitudes of platitudes on the greatness of God, and the psalmist would say, thanks, and that's the end of the song. But we know there are those who belong to God and who try to live as God intends, will always be opposed to those who oppose God. And so it wasn't read this morning, but there's a strange interlude in this psalm that tells the psalmist that he hates those who hate God and asks that God destroys them. So even though this sounds like the psalmist wants revenge, it's really a request that God set things right in the world. Thy will be done. He opposes those who oppose God and asks that God take care of them in his justice. Psalm 1 says the wicked will perish, and we have to assume that God will carry out that prophecy. And once his heart is set right, assured that God will handle that, the psalmist moves into his final stanza, an oath of loyalty, to ask God to search and test and see if these inward parts are right, and then lead him into the kingdom. So the challenge today is to take the key words in the final stanza seriously. We need to ask God to search us every day, to search our heart, which means we need to be in dialogue with God in prayer, and we need to check in and tell God what's going on. Because it's his job to test, to try out those thoughts and make sure that they're pure and undefiled. Then he'll prove the depths to see if there's any grief, for the word is actually synonymous with the word wicked here. Anything emotionally left over, things like resentments and anger and hatred that would stop us from doing his will. And as we pass through all of those purification processes, then we're ready for God to take us to the final step, to lead us to a way of everlasting. So the end takes us to the beginning. God has already searched us and tested us. He sees everything we are and still loves us, for we are his creation. The difference is to remain constant as he is constant with us. We can't just check in with him on some days and check out on others. Now, you may have come here today confused or bewildered what's going on in your life. I certainly am after last week and all the things that went on in the news. And God seems like a thousand light years away. And maybe you feel that God doesn't love you anymore. And you don't know if he spent time with you. Well, God loves every inch of you because you are his perfect creation. And he's right here, sitting alongside you in the pew, walking alongside you, riding in the back seat of your car, waiting to hear from you. And even if you're trying to hide from God, you can't. I mean, it's a little like a young toddler who tries to crawl under the covers and hide in a closet and pretend that if we don't think about things, they will just go away. I was reminded of this not too long ago when my young adult son, Floyd, decided to go to Europe. He's a bit of a free spirit at that time, living half his life in the hollowed halls of a financial planning firm and the other half in the wild and woolly rock world and band he led in San Francisco, playing at the Fillmore. So when he chose to head for Pamplona, Spain to run with the Bulls, I was a mite concerned. I had nightmares with him impaled on top of a bull's horn, dragged through the streets. And the nightly newscast didn't help with reports of people landing in hospitals and hostile snorting bulls taking on one more backside. So when my husband and I didn't hear from him for days, I found myself on the wicked side of grief, angry and resentful and a little frightened that our son might have become a statistic. And I prayed for God to find him and rescue him and bring him home safely. And then I just prayed the whole thing to go away. But I shouldn't have worried. God had his searchlight out for him from the beginning. He was never far from the safe gaze of God. And I was the one that tried to run away. And of course, our son had the last word. Yeah, Mom, I came back with all my limbs. I'm intact. Okay. Insert a sigh of relief. Nothing can hide us from God's presence. The late Ray Stedman, a wonderful pastor from Peninsula Bible Church, and to whom I owe a debt of gratitude for many of the ideas in this sermon, offers a profound prayer that sums up this psalm so well. He said, Lord, I don't understand what's going on around me. And my solutions may be quite inferior, may even be wrong. But Lord, I'll trust you to lead me. Reveal the wickedness that my life undetected in my own heart and guide me in the way that leads to the fullness of life. See, our God is but a touch away.